Hello and welcome to this video where I want to talk to you about how I made this pair of early medieval shoes, why and how, and what I would do different if I did it again. So the whole story started when I went to the National Museum in Dublin a week or two ago, and I saw this shoe in the glass case there on the first floor. When you come up the stairs, it's on the right hand side if you want to go and check it out for yourself. And obviously I couldn't handle the shoe. I couldn't open the glass case and look at it really closely, so I don't know what kind of stitches they used, and I didn't really see the pattern. What I did notice though is that it didn't seem to use saddle stitch, so that to me meant that it's not a turn shoe, and I might be wrong. If someone wants to get back to me from the museum and say, no, you did it all wrong, it's all terrible, how dare you, you're very welcome. So I thought I could try to make one of those, and that was the plan, just to make one. I'm not a shoemaker at all. I have made medieval shoes before, so I have a little bit of experience, and I've done a little bit of other leather work, but I have no formal training whatsoever. I have some nice tools that they probably didn't have in the Middle Ages either. It's not exactly experimental archaeology because I didn't use only the tools that I think they had, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. So the analysis of the shoe was just visual. I took, I think, 4 pictures, which you've all seen now, and I then thought, okay, it's not a turn shoe, it seems to be made from one piece, and then I went home and tried to make the pattern. I did an online search for early medieval Irish shoes, I think, and I came up with this pattern. So that was a little bit of a help. I don't know if I did actually need it, but just to be honest, I did see this picture. And then I started just drawing on brown paper. That's what I usually use because it's cheap and it's big. I was wearing 2 pairs of socks while I was drawing around my foot because it was cold, and also because I wanted to make sure I didn't make the shoe too small. And then I transferred that paper model onto felt, just because I had some felt lying around, and again, it's not super expensive. It's probably not the ideal material for a mock-up because it does stretch a little bit. Anyway, I made about 4 mock-ups probably in total. So you see that in the pictures that I had green and like beige felt, and then I tried to wrap that around my foot. One of the adjustments I had to make, and it's probably still not perfect, is the tip of the shoe. In the pictures it looks quite pointed, and I didn't quite get that, I think, as pointed as the original is. And the most difficult part I find always is the heel, especially when you're using your own foot. It's very difficult to draw around that, and I'm not very flexible. So that was the area with the most adjustment, was the heel. But I think I have it roughly right now. And I made a point of taking a picture of the model in the museum of the heel with the little triangle there. I think my triangle is a little bit larger than that. It is also, in my experience, the weakest point of a shoe because your heel is gonna push down on it with most of your weight. I don't know. I haven't worn this shoe for weeks and weeks and weeks, so I don't know how it will behave. If I get a chance during the summer, I might wear it on a hike or something. I don't really know yet, so I might get back to you on that at a later point in time if you're interested. And then I got the leather, where I had already bought the leather. I got it in Padmore and Barnes, which is an outdoor shop now in Kilkenny, but it used to be a shoe factory, and they have loads and loads of leather still left. You just have to go there the right day of the week when Pat is there and ask him for it. So I bought this huge piece of leather. I want to say it's half a cow. I presume it's a cow. And it's also not authentic because it's chrome tanned. But I thought rather than trying to buy leather online that might be veg tanned, I source it locally. Judge me if you want, I don't really care. I got this huge piece. I would have just needed a little bit more than A3, I think. My feet are rather small. The pattern is just a little bit bigger than A4, wider than A4. So A3 would have probably almost done. So I have loads and loads left over, and I might make another one and do other things with the leather. So I cut that out. I used basically a carpet knife that I usually use for my leather work. It's nice and sharp. I don't think they would have had a blade that is that thin. The cutting out bit, it doesn't really matter, but for the pattern, it does matter, I think. So after cutting out the shoe pattern, I had to add the decoration, because you have to add the decoration before you sew it, because it's easier to do that. I used the same knife for that, and I'm not entirely sure if they cut the pattern into the leather or if it was brandished or something. I've tried on a leftover piece of leather. I can't quite get it to look like the original, whatever method I use. It could also be due to the fact that this shoe in the museum has been in a bog for hundreds of years. Maybe that did something to the leather that I can't replicate without putting it in a bog for hundreds of years. I drew the pattern onto the leather with a pencil, which again is not very authentic because they wouldn't have had pencils. I don't know what they would have used. Maybe just used something with a softer tip to indicate where to cut, if they did cut. First side was easy enough, and then you have to try to do the same symmetrical on the other side, which is not as easy as it sounds. But I managed, I think. And then I cut into the leather. Obviously not as deep as cutting all the way through. And then I used a divider to mark where the sewing line, so to speak, goes. I don't know. There might be terms for this that I don't know because I'm not trained. And it's about, I would say, maybe 3 millimeters. I didn't use a ruler. I just eyeballed it. And then I also used the same divider to mark the distance of the holes that I had to punch. Obviously, you have to be careful that you have the same number of holes for the 2 sides of the seam, which doesn't always work out. But that's what I did. I don't know if the person who made the shoe, the Carrigallen shoe, had dividers. I'm sure they had dividers in general in early medieval times because stonemasons, I'm pretty sure, had them. Otherwise, how would they have made all these symmetrical patterns? And I presume you could just use, I'd say, like a stick that you make into a sort of prong shape. I think that would work as well. I haven't tried it. I might if I do another one. And then I punched the holes, and again I used modern punching irons that my sister got me for Christmas. Thank you. And I got them off Amazon. Boo. Well, she did. So there is a nice website where you get all kinds of super nice, high quality leatherworking tools. It's called dictum.com. It's a German website, but the tools are quite expensive. So you have to be a very dedicated leatherworker. I have some of their tools, but sometimes I just get the cheap Amazon version. Again, I'm not sure if they had those. I'm sure you could probably even use something like a nail, because it has this kind of diamond pattern. I haven't tried this. If you want to try, just use some leftover leather to try and punch with that, with a nail. They might have used just a special knife that I had. I don't know. We would have to find a leather workshop, an early medieval leather workshop. I doubt that will happen, because all the material will be rotted away and all you're left with are the iron tools, and it'd be difficult to tell what they are, I'd say, maybe. And I haven't done that much research. Maybe they have found a leather workshop that I'm not aware of. There are some illustrations, of course. They usually use these 15th century Nuremberg illustrations if they want to show any trades. If you see PowerPoint presentations about medieval trades, you usually see these illustrations from this, I think it's a 15th century Nuremberg manuscript, which is a bit useless for early Christian. And I punched all these holes, and then I started sewing the shoe together. As I said before in the analysis, I don't know what kind of stitch they used. Apart from that, they didn't use saddle stitch, so I used a stitch that I think is called corset stitch. I'm not quite sure. I kind of just made it up, and then I tried to find leather stitches online that aren't saddle stitch, and they showed 2, and one was called corset stitch, and it looks roughly like this. So I don't know if it is corset stitch or not, but this is what I used. And I started with the vamp, and I should have probably thought about it more, the order and where to start the stitching. Oh yeah, I used 2 needles like you usually do with leatherwork. You do use 2 for saddle stitch, So I thought I'll use 2 here as well, because it means you don't have to use a notch at the end or anything like that. You just work from both sides, kind of symmetrical. And that worked fairly well, I think. The thread is fairly thick. I got the thread in Vibes and Scribes in Cork. Unfortunately, I ran out of brown thread in the middle of the second shoe. But I thought, I don't care, I'll just use black one. And I don't actually think you can see it now that it's waxed. And so I did the vamp first, and then I did the heel, and it looked too square, so I had to cut it open again, undo the stitching, and then cut a little bit more of the leather, which was not great because I cut into one of the decorations, and I also kind of cut into the punched hole line. But I don't think, nobody's gonna look that closely at the heel. They won't notice. I've told you now, so you know, but anyway. But I then also put it back onto my paper pattern and adjusted it so I would do it better for the second shoe, because by then I had decided to make a second shoe, to have a pair. I think when you sew the heel, the best thing to do is to start at the very bottom, which I didn't do with the first shoe, but you live and learn. And then I finished that, and voila, I had a shoe. I then put the first coat of beeswax on it that my friend Patrick makes and provides me with. And then I went off and I was a very happy camper. And the evening of that day, I came back and I started cutting the second shoe. I had bought a scalpel for that in a craft shop, which makes the cutting out of the pattern much easier. I would not recommend it though for the decoration because the cuts are too fine. And I think it would work better with a regular, what's a regular knife? Well, I have a wood carving knife and it does cut the leather as well. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a third shoe just using this knife and using fewer modern tools. I'm still going to use electric light and stuff, but I'm not going to use any scalpels because I don't think they had blades that thin and it doesn't really work for the decoration. And I don't know what the straps look like because they don't survive in the museum example. I'm still trying to figure that out, so that's why I haven't included it in the video. But the task was really just to recreate the shoe as is in the museum, which I think I have kind of achieved. For the second shoe, it took me about 3 to 4 hours from cutting out to finishing it, just in case you're wondering how long it takes, because I thought that was also interesting to see how long it takes and how elaborate it is to make such a shoe, to give us a bit of a judgment of who would have worn this. It's not expensive to make. You only need leather and there's no metal or anything in it. So I don't know. I don't think it's a very elaborate shoe. In my opinion, and the pattern, it takes some work to cut the pattern into it. If it is cut, it takes less time than if it was brandished or something. It's hard to tell, but I'd say it's a fairly inexpensive shoe. I have created a pattern that you could print out if you wanted to, and I will link that in the video description. You have to adapt it to your foot as well. It's not perfect, it just gives you roughly an idea of how it would work. Because, you have to leave a bit of a challenge. And of course, nobody has the same shape of feet that I have and the same size. So you'll have to adapt it to your shoe size, but it gives you a rough idea. And I'll have color coded things on it so you know which parts have to be the same length and stuff like that. I hope you can work out what I mean by that. So thank you very much for watching this video so far. I hope it was enlightening for you. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comments below and I will try to get back to you as soon as possible. Slán go fóill!